We're just going to get started in 1 minute. Thanks for joining us. We still have 1 minute before we hop on. We've got a couple folks on here. Thanks for joining us. All right, Dominga, I'm going to unmute you so I can introduce you. All right, then we're just going to stay unmuted this whole time. This is our second live on YouTube via Zoom, the Rural Learning Collaborative and the Oregon Science Project. My name is Christina Trecha. I am the facilitator of the Rural Learning Collaboratives and the Oregon Science Project. And we are now doing these live on YouTube interviews as a playful, easy way to kind of jump on and hear from some interesting people. And we have a friend of mine and a colleague from several years ago, Dominga Sanchez, who is here joining us. We had the opportunity to work together when we both were living in San Diego at the University of California, San Diego, known as UCSD. We worked in the Center for Research on Educational Equity and Assessment for Teaching Excellence. It was a long acronym, and it was an office with folks doing lots of research on how students were making their way through education and what those spaces looked like, and what the obstacles were, and how you can actually invest in removing those and thinking in new ways. We were also part of launching a giant campus-wide STEM education initiative, and I think we are both glad that we have landed where we have at this moment, and that we still get to connect. So I just want to thank you for joining me. Today's theme is teaching engineering. And we're going to have an informal conversation about that. Dominga and I have been sharing some questions, and we've been on here actually for a half an hour, just kind of socializing and talking about teaching engineering and the state of teaching and learning, and our own personal stories about that in preparation to spend about 20 minutes with you. So thanks for joining us. And I'm going to have Dominga start off with telling us a little bit about your program that you're at Oregon State University, which is really unique and interesting. And that's where you're at right now before we get onto some other questions.
Thank you. So thank you, Christina, again for inviting me. And thank you for those who are watching. My name is Dominga Sanchez. I moved over here a couple years ago. I have a background in structural engineering. And I worked with Christina at UC San Diego and Create, working with many teachers also in professional development activities, particularly engineering. So for me, engineering is my thing. And Christina has a great way to science things up and make it exciting. And when one person's excited about science and another person's excited about engineering, you can't get a better match than that. So we had fun, a lot of fun. And so like I said, I have a structural engineering background. I learned a lot about education area at UC San Diego and with Christina, a little bit about science. And so I decided to come to Oregon State to pursue my PhD in engineering education. And why did I choose it? Well, I just had so much fun working with teachers in San Diego. I learned a lot from individuals like Christina, individuals that create. I definitely saw an issue, I think I want to say an issue or a problem between the communication between scientists and the community. And I felt like I was that middle person where we would do a lot of outreach, and I would go to the community. I would translate a lot of the outreach into Spanish. I worked with Dr. Jim Rohr from SPAWAR, and it was just an amazing experience that I did not know about. So here I am pursuing my engineering education degree at Oregon State University in the civil engineering department.
Thank you for sharing that. Yeah, I remember working with Jim as well. Um, all right. So from engineering to engineering education, not a pathway that we hear a lot. So that means that a lot of times when we talk about engineering education, a lot of us kind of look around the room. So we talk about that STEM acronym. Maybe we talk about STEAM, we put an art in there. So science, technology, engineering, and math. And yet the engineering piece can be kind of elusive if you're talking about what you see in the classroom, especially the elementary classroom. And why do you think that is? Why do you think, we have so much emphasis on math? Yes, we have obviously more technology now with the distance learning realities, I guess, and some science in elementary. We know Oregon is in the lead of the least amount of science time in elementary, but that engineering is really elusive. What are some thoughts you have about why you think that is?
So I'm gonna answer that based on what I experienced in these teacher PDs, working with teachers. I don't have a teaching background, or I did not have a teaching background or education background. So when I was working in San Diego, everything was new to me, and my expertise was engineering. And when I would be invited to talk to teachers about engineering and how they can incorporate it in their lessons or with NGSS standards, um, I noticed that there was this like lack of exposure, or lack of knowledge of how to approach engineering. It's a very strong word that teachers were like, "Oh my God, engineering, engineering." Um, and I think I just wonder, what do teachers think when you hear the word engineering, right? Some teachers are comfortable with it. Some teachers have questions about it. Some teachers did not know anything. And by not knowing or by not having experienced it, they would take their time to participate or to be involved in whatever engineering experience we were providing. So I think it's definitely a lack of exposure, um, maybe a little bit of understanding deeply what the NGSS is about. When I saw that those books that you showed me, I was like, "Whoa!"
Oh, that's right. Back at the beginning, and we had
Yeah,
the physical books, and I'm like, "Here, I'm
yeah.
going to lend you this book." And there's lots of engineering in it. I'd love your thoughts.
And so I saw, like, for me, the scientific approach and everything else was overwhelming. But when I would see that blue engineering component, I'm like, this is me. This is where I can contribute. You can do everything else. Just bring me in for the blue part.
And you love physics. We were talking about
Mhm.
how you found physics after. I mean, you love math, and when you had this great counselor finally, so I think you should take physics, and you thought, oh my gosh, this is everything that I love about math, and this is the science that
Mhm.
makes sense to me. And so I think about that also, in that you do have this science background. It's like the thinking of an engineer, the way that you approach things. And also, I always thought that you approach your work that way too, right? It's like a mindset that you have.
Yeah, I
Okay.
think it's hmm. We were talking about how there's challenges, right? Engineering, you're always encountered with a problem, and you need a team to try to solve the problem. And it's all with these challenges, and this thrive to complete the task, right? And feel, yes, I did it, uh, moment. And I think that it's those challenges that can either motivate you or demotivate you, um, when you're doing these experiments. And I feel that making that fun for kids has been my greatest challenge. Having kids enjoy it has been my greatest challenge. And I don't know uh, the teaching aspect of it because I understand that as teachers have all these standards to follow and requirements to complete. But outside of the school, you can have fun and play, right? I'm mentioning that because, as I told Christina, I used to coach my son's team for Odyssey of the Mind, um, balsa structure group. And what that is, it's a program. It's an after school extracurricular activity in which these kids would get together and explore. They were brought a challenge. You have to build this structure. You have to it has to weigh this much. You can only use this material, and you cannot get any adult help. Of course, you need adult supervision to make sure that you're not cutting your fingers off. But how do you talk engineering to third, fourth, and fifth graders without making them feel overwhelmed and also enjoy the process? That was the biggest challenge for me. Um, but I was the one that was surprised because these kids are really smart and they have so much natural motivation. They're curious, that they ask questions and questions and questions. And as long as they can answer them in a way that they can understand, everything was good. Yeah.
And so the idea of asking questions and being given a challenge and the iterative, repetitive, creative process, the collaboration of working together kind of reminds me of what people think about when they're in the kitchen together during the holidays. Like having you say that, like some people have gotten frustrated in the kitchen, some people have felt successful, but I've just suddenly had this picture of like, it's the engineering challenge of getting all of the food out at the same time and depending on what you're cooking and who you're cooking for in the group and how some people identify as the person who's doing well with the group, and other people might feel like I don't belong in that space. I'm over here hanging out with all my cousins and the kids, and we're just not going to do that. It seems like it's like a mindset of collaboration and creativity and an openness to asking questions and trying new things,
Hmm.
right? And so it's thinking,
Yeah.
and so when you're talking about this program, um, it gets me really excited because I feel like, and we've talked about this, it's often this special collaborative social creative program like this Odyssey of the Mind or a robotics program or something that really links you in. You make friends, you're suddenly being really identified as someone who can approach this, whereas maybe in a more formal classroom setting, this attribute of, or part of your identity or that identity is not recognized in the classroom, but is recognized in this. And I'm talking about from the student, right? So the students who are asking questions and, in that space, they're not pestering you, they're asking you questions. And that's what you
Hmm.
want them to do and try new things. And so I was telling Dominga, I wanted to call this talk like Beyond the Egg Drop. So just thinking that engineering isn't just this end of the year activity that the kids get to do that's a culminating thing, but it also, these really rich out of school activities, not everyone gets access to those. That was always a tension that we were working through, even with teachers, right? Not all teachers get access to the awesome engineering professional development that you used to be part of and run.
Hmm. Yeah, it is. Access is definitely um, an issue. I think I didn't have access to that experience that my children had. I didn't know about engineering. That engineering was a major until I was 24, community college level. Um, so yeah, I think it's still an ongoing issue of whether all kids have access to these programs, and what do you do when they do not have access, and how do you nurture that curiosity? um, no access, no resources, it does make it a little bit challenging for kids to experience these awesome programs out there. I'm not sure how or what type of extracurricular activities students have here in Oregon, but I remember in California. So I'm from California. There were at least we tried to provide these experiences with underserved communities. And by when I say we, I mean like I was part, as an undergraduate, I was part of a SHIP, which is Society of Hispanic Professional Engineers. I was part of ASCE, the American Society of Civil Engineers, and they had this outreach component where they would provide these outreach experiences beyond the spaghetti tower to students. And yeah, it's still I haven't really explored here because of, grad life is really busy. But I wonder, how, one, where my community is, because I don't see a lot of the Latinx community around me, but I wonder if it works the same way where these professional organizations still provide those type of experiences to students and to the communities.
I think some STEM hubs work on it. I'm not sure about their partnership with engineers or education in engineering, but some of the
Hmm.
STEM hubs do programs around the state. I
Hmm.
don't know about the undergraduates, but that does. I know that you're looking at that, and I'm not going to put you on the spot about the undergraduate experience,
Yeah.
and your proposal and your research and that. Uh, but I think that gets to the idea that we push for engineering in elementary, and we are like, sink or float, make it neutrally buoyant. Like that's a great challenge, like the science and the material science. And now you got to make something that just is going to float in the middle and apply what you explored about foam and rubber bands and clay. And there are pieces like that that seem to kind of fit like here or fit here, and less of a building of an understanding of what it means to engineer something, you know, to think of things in new ways, to go through that design process, unless you are in something that's kind of external, like maybe like a robotics club or, something out like you did the shake table outreach. So,
Hmm.
you have like a cadre of students that go through, or cadre, I don't know how you say it, that go through, right, through the year that you knew over time doing outreach with them. Um, so students enter this post-secondary world, so they're out of high school. How do we even, how do they know about engineering? When I think of engineering, I think of, and you know this, oh my gosh, you have to spend like all night in a library and there's so much math, and it was less focused on what you could do with that degree, which just seems like so much. And here you are pursuing engineering education to, spread the word about that. But and I don't, I can put that out as a question, but I also just, I think, to me, we so often focus on something like engineering because so few of us truly understand what that means, even though it's in our everyday jargon and all of the stuff that we share about science and STEM and STEAM. I wonder if the like communicating about what you can do with an engineering degree or what it means to be an engineer is different than would be more like I think about UCSD, how there was the whole pathway to doing engineering, like in other countries, to create new ways to clean water and safety and health engineering, which was very different than being a software engineer, or I don't know,
Yeah, what is that program called?
can't remember.
I forgot, but there was a group of students that work internationally. There's a lot of options
Yeah,
of
but I feel like
engineering.
we need to know more about them. I think that would help us in our engineering awareness. But I want to make sure, so we're almost out of time. I want to make sure we get some pictures of those students that you worked with.
Oh, yes, I
Yes,
wanted to
because
show
I think
you.
this is a great example when we talk about like
So,
beyond the spaghetti tower.
yeah, so Christina and I were talking about, well, what can students do at home? And there's there's a lot of simple projects. I think that the my thing, like I said, was when I was working with kids, was to motivate them and help them feel accomplished instead of demotivating me. One of the challenges that I had was to teach kids about forces, and these are third, fourth, and fifth graders. Um, and so, how do you talk about forces and how do you talk about materials without giving them the answers? Because in the rule book, it said you can't give the kids the answer. You can't tell them what to build. And I was like, wow, well then how are we going to talk about this? So what I did with these kids is I asked them to bring in different type of glues, crazy glue, wood glue, Elmer's glue, rubber glue, and different types of materials that we can crush. So the parents built a crusher that is the same model that was going to be used in the competition to be able to build a balsa structure and hold a certain amount of weight. But before we went into the balsa and the forces, we first talked about materials and how glue responds with balsa. So what I'm going to be sharing is a couple of pictures of these brilliant kids. I say brilliant because they won first place 2 years in a row. And without my help, the only thing I did was coach them. And when I say coach them, it's like, well, yes, well, Miss Sanchez, how am I going to do this? I'm like, well, why don't you tell me?
You
What do you think we should do?
facilitated. You
Yeah.
facilitated.
And I facilitated, yes. And so they were like, well, what if I design it this way? I'm like, well, let's try it. Let's give it a try. And I wasn't even allowed to hold the balsa wood so that they can glue it. I wasn't even allowed to do that. They had to find a way um, by themselves to communicate with each other because these kids weren't in the same classroom. It was an after school thing. So this is the type of structures that they did, the glue that they decided what glue they were going to use. After exploring the glue options, they had to talk amongst themselves and say, well, what glue do we want to use? And they decided for that Zap-A-Gap glue. Each of the kids brought in their own structure. They built it at home under parent supervision because you see an X-Acto knife right there. So parent supervision was required. But they brought in amazing structures and they brought in different materials to explore. That's the crusher that you see right there. So they brought in Coke cans, they brought in boxes, they brought in water bottles, they brought in different types of stuff to crush to see how this crusher works and to talk about the materials. Um, and so there they are having fun, and you can see how, that Quaker Oats thing did not crush. So they started sitting on top of it like little monkey because we ran out of weights. So we couldn't crush it, but they wanted to see it crush. These are different type of structures that they built. And at the time, the oldest child here was a fourth grader. So these are third and fourth graders. And they built it and they went home and did it again and came back and we built again. And behind this whole balsa structure, they had to integrate a story. So they had to integrate a story plot. They had to dress up in costumes, and they had to make everything with no parent help, no adult help, except what do we need to buy?
So it wasn't just a crusher for crusher's sake. They had to come up
Mm-mm.
with a scenario where you had to prevent
Yeah.
something from being crushed. So it gives you more of that real world plus your imagination, which
So there's the STEAM, right? It's not
there you
really
go.
STEM, it's a
Yeah.
STEAM now.
Mhm.
Where's the math involved? Well, they had to talk about how much it cost, the materials. They had to write down if they purchased something from a garage sale, or if they went to Home Depot. They added up the cost, and they had to turn it in. So there was a budget involved, and the weight also of the structure. Let's see, and this is a different type of experience. This is a I was working with the electrical engineering department, and they had these cool stuff, these cool gadgets, and we took it out to talk about engineering to schools. And this is a graduate student that I worked with, and so I just wanted to share that this is also something simple and fun.
Well, and that's what sparks interest, right? So you go
Yeah.
somewhere and you have that experience, and then you go home and you Google something, and then
Hmm.
you ask your teacher about it, or you ask, one of your parents or someone in your household about it, and then you read a book about it, and it's like just that trajectory of things tumbling together. And those out of school non-formal experiences can spark that. And we just have to keep thinking about how do we maintain that, support that, identify that, create spaces for that in that formal pathway, right?
Yes. And so I started getting curious. So before I would bring a project in to the teacher PDs that I was invited to, I would test it out with my son. And at that time, he was second, third, fourth and fifth grade. My years down there working with teachers. And one of his favorite ones that he was like, "Oh, you should share this one," was the roller coaster, which is using insulation pipes. And part of bringing these projects into your home is being okay with having it messy for a couple of hours. I mean, you have to be okay as a parent to let them explore and let them be messy. Of course, there's cleanup time, but part of this, like I remember when I wanted to do this project, I cleaned the whole wall, like took the picture frames down. I made sure there was nothing in the way so that he can do it without my help. I'm like, "Oh, you just need me to hold this so you can tape it down." Um, but I learned that a lot of this does require some space and creativity, and for him not to have that concern that he's making a big mess.
Yeah, and also something that we're hearing so much now with distance learning is the learning coach at the elbow. The learning coach looking in the screen and wanting to answer for the student, right? So that parental guidance. So with engineering, you need a little more hands off and knowing that students are gonna. So this is a marble ramp. If you're not familiar with these, it's the pipe insulation from the store, and you
Hmm.
can have hole tubes or you can cut it and have it open, and you can just
Yeah.
have a marble and play with it for weeks on end. You say 2 hours, I might say a couple of weeks.
Yeah. We spent a couple of days with my apartment because I lived in a small apartment. There was no space to walk, but he was having fun. And I think like when I was coaching the other kids, the hardest thing was to not be involved. I mean, I wanted to crush materials too. I wanted to break things with them and show them, look at this, it's so cool. I wanted to
Maybe
build
we need
my
to make
own.
space for parents to do that. Maybe what part of it is that you have, maybe we need to build that in. We can't
Yeah.
take all the fun. The kids can't have all the fun.
Yes, yes. And so it was it, like I said, I did not have a teaching background, and it was very challenging to be able to guide these kids without knowing how to, I guess, with minimal hands-on, but with a lot of support, supporting them and answering their questions and
Well, and also knowing a
hopefully.
lot about forces.
Yes. Yes, we did a lot of discussions every time we
Yeah.
talked about forces. We met twice a week for a couple of weeks. And then suddenly they just took it on, and they pulled it off. And I learned that kids are very smart. Kids are very smart, very curious. And how to nurture that curiosity is important.
I think that that's a great note to end on. And I just really want to acknowledge, I believe the reason that those students did so well is because you facilitated with your laughter, which we're in a professional setting now, but your laugh is one of my favorite laughs. And your knowledge of science and engineering. So your knowledge of identifying problems, solving problems, the materials they're working with, and how to approach that. It's that balance of having enough of that background, which I think takes us all the way back to that first question around why do we see less, why don't we see more engineering, right? And
Mm,
so having a lot of background is great, having some is great, just trying on some engineering is the best, right?
yeah.
And just trying on and getting messy and trying to coming up with challenges and just integrating it more into the classroom is just a great place to start. And I want to thank you so much.
Steps.
Small steps. Small
Mhm.
steps. I want to thank you so much for joining me. It's been such an honor to be able
Thank
to
you.
work with you here in the Pacific Northwest. I miss our days down there, but I'm glad that we're
Yes.
here. And I hope that I can bring you in another time to
Okay.
meet some of the folks in the Rural Learning Collaborative. And thank you all of you who joined us on YouTube Live. It's our second one. It's pretty exciting. But is there anything that you would like to say before we leave to the people?
Just for the parents that are looking for engineering projects, there's a lot of really elementary engineering projects in Google, and some of them that don't require a lot of resources, and just try it out. Try it out and have fun with the kids. It's hard to go outdoors right now, and there's a lot of interesting projects that you can do at home, and might get a little messy, but enjoy the time.
Enjoy the time. Well, I enjoyed my time with you. Thank you so much.
All right. Thank
Well,
you.
And
Okay.
I'm going to go ahead and stop the live stream, and then I'm going to remove you from the meeting so you don't have to sit here and watch me try and stop everything. But
Okay.
I'll talk to you soon.
Okay. Bye.
Okay. Bye-bye. And thanks everybody for joining. And we'll see you next time on the next YouTube Live. If you would like to know more about what we do in the Rural Learning Collaborative, I encourage you to go to tinyurl.com/rural STEAM network. That's tiny